What's up, everybody? Hi, Sidetricks. We have a special guest today. I like to let my guests introduce themselves because I don't talk for people.
Oh, are you talking about me?
I definitely don't mansplain. Joining us today is...
Hi, my name is Walker Davis, and this is my first Twitch outing, I realize.
Ooh! Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Walker. Why are you even here?
Well, I am a lover of all things related to redefining healthier, more sustainable, more well-balanced ideas of masculinity. And so when I heard you guys were interested in doing an episode on toxic masculinity...
it's not just an episode on toxic masculinity. It's an episode on just... What is it?
The big old masculine umbrella.
The big old masculine.
And what is the other side of toxic masculinity?
Yeah. What is cool masculinity? Citrix says hello, Walker.
Hi, Citrix.
That's it. That's how it works.
Cool. Thank you for the 5 minutes.
People can ask questions.
And we can feel them in real time.
Feel them in real time. You know this lady.
And he's also here because he's my partner.
That's not
that I've
why
mentioned
he's
before.
Here.
I'm just saying that was the I hooked
he
it
knows
up,
about
you know?
it.
Like
yeah, but that's not why. He's here of his own accreditation. Yeah. Why are you here to talk about masculinity?
I don't know why I'm
Woman?
Here.
Well, she's kind of
female.
Actually, on that, I saw this really great clip from a quote from this feminist Instagram person. And I probably should know her name, but I don't. I apologize. It's very anti-feminist.
Feminist Instagram person is perfect.
But somebody asked her, as a woman, what can you tell us about masculinity? And she said the same thing that as a black man, you can tell me about whiteness. Because you are experiencing it from a lens that I will never be able to. And so you have this outside perspective on how whiteness affects things that I don't. And so I think, y'all know I identify as a cis woman. I think there are certain reflections and views on masculinity and how masculinity can affect the world and people around them that I see that perhaps y'all don't see because you're in it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know?
Shit.
You know what?
She's going to hold us accountable for
this. Please do. I don't mind being held accountable. I'm confident in my masculinity. Part of the reason why we wanted to have this as a conversation, one, because it's a huge internet conversation right now. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are redefining masculinity in very cool and fun ways. And a lot of people are upset about masculinity as just even an idea, and are using it to like recruit people, make people angry.
Well, people are upset about masculinity, and people are upset about the feeling or impression that masculinity is like being taken away
or under attack
or erased or just totally rejected, which I don't believe is true.
For sure. Before we could even start, this is a big question, which I asked before we started recording, and none of us really had an answer. But we're gonna break it. We're gonna break it down now live. Mm-hmm. What is masculinity?
I think one of the problems is that there's, it's kind of a dynamic definition. And we talked about this a little bit, that masculinity used to look very differently and has and will continue to evolve.
Yeah. I
think right now, the kind of fraught conversations you both talked about are rooted in taking a very, like a Western idea of masculinity from like the last few hundred years, and wow, it's blowing up.
What's up? We're getting rated right now. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the chat. Hey, fellow music fans. Space Jam DVD is Drunkle Ted's amazing hit. I'm Drunkle Ted.
Oh, okay.
From G4.
God.
We're getting rated right now, which means a bunch of people from Case Blackwell's channel have now joined it. There's like 140 people that just dropped in to our masculinity conversation.
Masculinity!
We're so fucking amped!
Wanna go to war!
Walker was just talking about like masculinity and its definition kind of evolving and changing. One of the things that I think has been so interesting is like people feel like masculinity now is changing so much, but people don't look back in history really and look at how masculinity was evolving through cycles even back then. So one of the examples I gave when we were talking at the top, Walker said masculinity is like, you know, one of the things in there is like being virile and fucking a lot of chicks and having that be a thing. But back in the peak of the Roman Empire, you were really hyper masculine if you had sex with your bros a lot.
Yeah, like, are you man enough to take a dick?
Yeah, and that was like a big test.
Still valid.
Of just being like, hey, your brothers are out there in the field with you. They're tough. They're strong. If you can dominate another man, you're tough. If you just have sex with your wife, come on.
That's easy.
That's easy. She has to.
She's legally obligated.
Right.
She's legally your property.
Right, but that's a big thing of your having sex with your wife was for procreation. That was for kids. It wasn't for fun. For fun was having sex with your friends, because they know you.
I mean, I agree.
Right, and
it's really fun to have sex with your friends.
When one of your friends died, like that was your love. That was the person that you mourned the most because they went through everything with you. In the time period you and your wife or your opposite sex partner had very little in common with each other. In terms of like what your experience of any part of the world was.
Yeah, you lived in different worlds.
Yeah. Sex bros. That was a really big thing in the masculinity space. All right, so masculinity, expectations. This we got to define this thing that everyone is so upset about changing. Being a breadwinner. Not maker. Win.
Well, yeah, just kind of dominance and, you know, aggression and conquering in all areas, whether that's economic and business, you know, making a shit ton of money and being the, you know, the highest person on the corporate ladder or whatever ladder you're talking about. It's power and status, you know.
Power, status, there's an aspect of like taking things that comes from the masculine control,
but also like the first, like the strongest and the fastest, and who can get the most.
Yeah,
like
superlative.
It's very much in comparison to others.
Yeah.
That's a good way to
what's
find it.
interesting about that, and this is something that has also existed throughout history. Being super masculine, you're the leader. You're the one calling the shots. Now we've all seen this sort of like paradigm of there's leaders and there's bosses. So like a boss calling the shots, having to tell everybody and like having to sort of like outwardly express their power versus a leader who is like, I am the strongest and therefore I will take the first step in order to protect my group.
Where the strength isn't projected and talked about, it's understood.
Yeah.
It's almost like this common group understanding where
it's not active. It's not performed. It is actually projected. Because if you are, you know, really the strongest and most capable, like you're going to demonstrate that and not need to like remind people and be like, hey, I'm the leader.
Right. So that's something I've always found interesting is these dudes that are on the internet right now. There was one guy that made some. Allison showed me like a Instagram post, and I was laughing because he had his name and his Twitter thing, and then in parentheses,
alpha male.
Alpha male,
dude.
Yeah, yeah. Which
is there more beta cuck shit than that?
Right.
Than like putting "I am an alpha male" in your Twitter handle?
It's like
what
being,
a little bitch.
It's like being funny. If you have to tell people that you're funny, you're not.
Right.
You're not.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people that go into that space that are just like, hey, I'm the toughest, strongest person in the room. It's like, I actually feel like the fact that you just came up to me and told me that means like you already feel threatened.
Yeah.
And you're very sensitive. And that doesn't feel very strong and grounded and powerful.
Not
if you have to prove it in every instance you possibly can, not very tough.
Yeah.
And that gets exhausting. Interacting with people that feel like they have something to prove in every single interaction.
Right. And that's what's interesting about this like masculinity conversation on the internet right now is like the people that are leading the charge about like we gotta make sure that masculinity is all these things, are the most delicate
little
flowers.
Snowflakes.
That are just like,
because the men who are secure in their masculinity just like don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Because they know they're not under attack.
they're just like, I just got it. You know, I will tell you this little sort of side story because it's going to lead us into the issues that kind of like happen in our gender roles, which I think is an issue, but I don't really have an answer for.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to coach, acting coach, like around the country,
Mm-hmm.
and while I would work with people that had never been actors before, and they would have to do monologues, and I started noticing this behavior in all the educational spaces I was in. If a little girl was up there, she would be trying, she'd be having an emotional experience, maybe she starts crying.
Mm-hmm.
The room immediately starts going, hey, it's okay, why don't you have a seat? And what they've done in that space is they go, you have a lot of feelings, and your feelings are tougher than you are. You don't have any control over your feelings. Why don't you sit down and take a break? So we instinctively will like give women or feminine leading people outs easy. We want to make it easier for them to quit. The message is, your emotions are too tough. You can't handle it. On the inverse, which is no better, little boy is up there and starts crying and is having a tough time. Everyone is like, hey, you got this. Keep doing it. Whatever. But also, what we're saying in that moment is like, I don't give a shit about what your feelings are. I still need you to show up.
This needs to get done.
This needs to get done.
And it's on you to do it.
And what's amazing about that is like both of those lead to like positive and negative outcomes. You know, like, yeah, there's a lot of time where who gives a shit about your feelings? Like,
Well,
we still need you to show up as all people.
Yeah.
And also, in both of those scenarios, there is this implication that your feelings, no matter what they are and no matter how you react to them, make you unable to accomplish this goal.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way for you to do it while you're having the feelings you're having, which in and of itself is completely and totally untrue. You can have feelings, and I've gotten shit done while crying plenty of times.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like,
But part of the thing, and we talked about this a little bit the last time in our pickup artist conversation
Okay.
about men have feelings.
what?
I don't know if people know that, but like we have feelings.
Yeah, you
we have a
got
lot of
3,
feelings.
right?
We have 3.
Horny,
we have
angry,
angry. Yeah.
and hungry. We have a lot of feelings, and there's in many aspects of our culture not a lot of space for those feelings.
Yeah.
There's a reason why suicide is very high in men. And we talked about this last time of like, if you don't have value in the tribe, you don't come to the plate with inherent value as a man. Value has to be earned. And then there's also, when you attempt to reach out to your community is not just like the little boy and girl I was talking about. They're not there to go, oh my God, you're having such a hard time. Let's all rally around you and help. Your community there goes, hey, you really need to suck that shit up.
Either deal with it or go away.
Either deal with
Those
it
are
or go
your
away.
options.
And that's, we have the same issue. A lot of our veterans suffer because of that. There is not the same mental health support. When you talk about therapy, if men are like, yeah, I'm really in therapy, people will be like, yeah, I know, because you're damaged and you're fucked up and you're a man. Of course you need to be in therapy. You don't know anything about your emotions and you're a piece of shit.
You
And you
idiot.
and what's amazing to me, and I've found this in sort of like my psychology study of like men and women, men in terms of their logical space versus like women in terms of like being stronger in accessing their emotions. Women will be like, I feel 500 different emotions, and there's all this beautiful nuance and everything. And men are like, I only feel these 3 emotions, and neither one of them are really equipped, because a lot of the women that I have partnered with or friends that I have known, sure, they feel a lot of different things and struggle with putting them into words or being able to translate the experience into sort of like, not something necessarily logical, but something that like we can understand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the ability to translate emotions into a cohesive statement is inherently a masculine skill or a feminine skill or anything in between.
Yeah.
That's just a skill that is not innate with most of us and needs to be cultivated.
And it's so, I mean, I think men especially have this idea that getting in touch with their emotions is going to turn them into like weepy, inept messes.
It's going to turn them unattractive.
It's the opposite. It's like when you know how to identify and process your emotions effectively, you get a hell of a lot stronger and more functional. Because you can stay aware of what comes up, what you need to do to deal with those things, rather than just kind of shoving it down there and then punching somebody in the head when they piss you off at the exact wrong time.
Well, I do want to speak to something that this comes out in the masculinity space about, and it's a real thing. It's sort of the same thing of like men that are short have trouble dating women.
I'm 6'6". You can't see that.
He's 6'6".
I have been fortunate to not deal with that problem.
But the thing is like they do have a harder time.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Regardless of how cool and open and like everything would want to be, they have a harder time.
No, when you're talking about hard truths of masculinity, it's stuff like that is actually quantifiable of like shorter men have trouble dating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Period. That's just how it is.
Yeah, it's hard. The same is also true for really sensitive and emotionally out-facing men. I have found so many friends of mine that have had trouble with their partners if their male partner is like really emotionally sensitive about a lot of stuff. And that may just be coming from a space of like, I'm not really used to dealing with that. So like the muscle, I'm used to my partners being like barely talking to me.
Right. Having to pull emotions
having
out
to pull emotions out, unless it's music. If it's emo music, they eat that shit up. So part of like what is happening out there in the space, in the sort of like incel space, and the like Andrew Tate space, talking to these guys that are struggling out there, they're trying to fulfill a need. That is a real need.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. I just think the core issue of that is that it's being turned kind of on its head of like, there's this narrative in the pickup Andrew Tate world of like, women don't actually fucking know what they want, first of all. To an extent, I sometimes think that that's true. I sometimes think that we list all of these qualities that we want to find in partners. I want somebody that I can connect with emotionally, who is not afraid to be vulnerable, and then when faced with that vulnerability, be like, what do I do now? Like, I got here and I don't know what to do. It's like, I want somebody who's not totally obsessed with appearances, but if you're 5'6", I'm okay. Thanks. Right. No, thank you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So like this narrative of like women need to be controlled because the things that they say they want and are okay, you're the proof of it.
Yeah.
Clearly it's not okay, and clearly it's not hot and acceptable. So we need to like dominate their brains, and it's just like, oh, like, is there a stopping point before we get to the manipulation stage?
Can we talk about the nice guy?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Thing. A lot of men that are like, I'm a nice guy, and that entitles me to all of these things.
That's the core of it. You can be as nice as you want, but if you are only being nice because you expect sex in return, you're not a nice guy.
Well, I also think part of it is there's a reason I don't like the word nice.
Sure.
And I like the word kind. I think what most people are talking about, I want to date a kind person.
Yeah.
Because kind means caring, kind means empathetic, kind means considerate for the sake of it, and not when people are looking so I can get a cookie or a gold star or sex or attention from women. You know, it comes from a place of integrity rather than performance.
Yeah.
And so the whole nice thing, it feels shallow and disingenuous.
Well, before I'm loving that we're breaking down all these like hard realities, because I think that that's something that these people that are manipulative use, is they're like, there is a kernel truth to what they're saying, and so the person fixates on that, and then they sell them something shitty afterwards. So for example, like for all the people that are like, I'm a nice guy and the person I'm attracted to is dating an absolute asshole, does that happen?
Yeah,
for fucking sure it does.
Yeah.
Do people date assholes? All the goddamn time. Now why do people date assholes? And this goes into the masculinity conversation of like, they're people that take what they want.
I have a theory about that in early stages of like dating and attraction, because I think, you know, as young people start coming of age and start being outwardly interested in dating and like hooking up, a lot of us didn't have the confidence or tools or awareness to be assertive at that age. Everybody, like, I think of puberty like, you know, an emotional Omaha beach where it's just, you're just fucking let out of these boats and just running, and there's just hails of chaos.
Blood everywhere.
It's terrifying. You're hiding behind whatever you can, but you're still constantly exposed and vulnerable. And so, you know, like, and you don't know who the hell you are yet. You're trying on all of these different identities and exploring what connects with you. And so it feels like a weird thing to be assertive or to know yourself that well. But assholes are assertive early on, you know? Like, if you don't give a shit about other people's feelings, that can translate as assertiveness and confidence.
And confidence at first.
At first, yeah, because it is, you know, I don't care what people think, and, like, I don't give a fuck what somebody thinks. It's like, those are two sides of a similar coin, and so I think that's where that idea comes from, because whenever I hear, like, I feel like the nice guy trope was everywhere in high school, you know, media, like Can't Hardly Wait and like that type of shit that we consumed, where, you know, like the sweet quiet boy who never made his attraction known to the hot girl,
right?
As if she's gonna for her to notice.
Yeah, she's gonna magically be like, oh yeah, let's fuck because you didn't say anything terrible to me. They don't put that together, and so the wires get crossed, and it's like, oh, girls date assholes. It's like,
well, and I think the other side of this is, if you are so focused on how nice or respectful you are, that's not all that we're looking for. Just because I want someone who is kind to me and respects me is part of the this is what I want in a partner list. It's not the only thing. So, and I feel it's very scary to look at what you are bringing to the table in a dating scenario and being honest with yourself and looking at where maybe you could be bringing a little bit more.
Which is universal.
Yeah.
Everyone should always be bringing more to the table.
Absolutely.
There is also a lot of like, people love people that are decisive.
yeah.
And that's true about groups. That's true about dating.
Yeah.
The more decisive you are, the stronger of a leader you are. Everyone will defer to whoever's the most decisive person in the room.
I've said this on this stream before, but like in the dating world, when I'm dealing with men, if someone says, hey, do you want to hang out? I'm like, sure. If someone says, hey, do you want to meet at this place on Wednesday? I'm like, yeah. You decisive motherfucker.
I'd
Oh
love
my
to take you
God.
out. Are you free on Wednesday?
Yeah.
Exact. Just being decisive and confident enough just to give a plan
Yeah.
is, I feel like, kind of a rare thing lately, and it is so deeply attractive. Just that one little change of perspective.
There's also the assholery of taking things. People love to be valued. And if I'm like, God damn, you're so valuable, I'm going to fucking take you right now. I don't even care what your opinion is. On the other side of it, it's like, ooh, this feels very adventurous and dangerous. And also like, I don't have to decide anything. I just get to be a prize.
And all I have to do is say yes.
And all I have to do is say yes.
Easiest thing in the world.
Right. That is sort of like part of the allure of the people dating assholes.
And why it can often lead to trouble.
Yeah.
Because most of us don't develop, a confident sense of our identity until much later.
A little bit later.
Right. But the thing is, though, is you can bring those things to the table without being a piece of shit.
Absolutely.
You can have that confident, decisive, I'm going to take you consensually.
Hopefully.
I'm being very decisive and I want you consensually.
Yes.
And like that energy can be there without you then transferring into being entitled. And acting like you genuinely do own or are above the other person.
Right. Or trying to manipulate the other person. Where it's being stated not as manipulation, but as I want to let you know what the fuck is going on in a hot way.
Yeah. We have a bunch of different things. I have a question I want to throw out here.
Yeah.
For Walker.
Yes.
What do you think men are struggling with right now that is like leading to this boom?
Well, I think I think a lot of people feel like the rules kind of changed on them. And that the expectations that they were, this happened generationally too.
That's right. And that's the how and why things changed.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
We write things down.
We do.
Sometimes.
There's a little bit of a plan.
There's a little bit of a plan.
As millennials, we can relate to the frustration of our parents saying like, just go to college, everything will be fine. Just go to college.
Yeah.
Go for your dreams.
That's all you need to succeed, because that was true back then.
Right. For a brief window.
Yeah, my grandfathers were both blue collar workers who had a house, multiple houses, a wife who stayed at home with the kids.
Boats.
They could afford to buy boats. And, one of them was a lineman for AT&T and the other one was a used car salesman.
Yeah.
And that kind of economy just doesn't exist anymore. And so that same kind of standard of masculinity just if you are lucky enough to survive on one income, that is not the norm. And
so what we've done, in order to be masculine, you have to earn 25 times more
by that standard.
Yeah. In order to be masculine.
Exactly.
You can't be masculine if you're still living with your parents. If you've got roommates.
And the other thing is, there was also this rise of economic stability and power with women who are no longer dependent on men for their survival. Women couldn't get a credit card until 1974, 73?
76, I think.
So in that... when The Godfather came out, women couldn't get a credit card without a man's approval. That is a huge shift. And so we also had parents and, elders who grew up in this dynamic that just doesn't exist the same way. And so the standards aren't the same anymore. And so I think there's this kind of vacuum of, that's why you have these chauvinists becoming so popular, like Andrew Tate, or
Right.
Donald Trump is the poster boy for this kind of bygone era of masculinity where, strength and dominance and
childish name calling.
And just that all around prickishness was, where it still worked.
Relationships
Yeah.
were domination based and not connection based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you know, your wife needed you to survive because she couldn't operate alone in the workforce.
Right.
And so there's this attraction to those kind of loud, albeit inaccurate voices who are saying like, hey, let's take things back to the way things used to be. Part of that is dependent on misogyny, because that is, I think that's one of the biggest things about how we define our masculinity is, or the biggest problems is that we define it externally based on our relationship to women. So it's like how many women can you sleep with? Like how hot of a wife can you get? And it's transactional. And so like it's never going to be sustainable. You know, obviously there are still a lot of women these days who I think find comfort in that dynamic too.
Yeah. For sure.
And let's be clear, there are absolutely things about the feminine masculine dynamic that are still really hot. like masculinity is hot to me. And I don't mean shitty masculinity where I'm not being treated well and where I'm not being respected and where I'm being manipulated. But like, honey, I love watching you chop wood. Like, it's hot. It's like
being strong.
Yeah, like being strong. Like, oh man, he is exerting physical power to make me comfortable. Huh, kill me.
Yeah. Well, so there's in this why things are changing. I think another angle on it is that the grocery list is longer of the things that you need to be as a person.
Oh, sure.
And as a partner. So, you know, back in the day, it was like, I was just going to say, don't beat me, but that wasn't true. That wasn't true. That wasn't even on the list. It was have a job. And then the rest was do whatever you want. And so from there it went, it's like, well, you know, you need to be a good listener. You need to be a good father. That wasn't even on the list.
Yeah.
Really.
You don't even have to
before.
show up.
You have to show up. You need to have all of these different things. And part of what's happening in the sort of like toxic masculinity space is a bunch of people being like, I don't want to. I want to go back to the day that like I didn't have to do stuff. That I could just say whatever I wanted and fuck you if your feelings are hurt. I could punch this person in the face because I don't like the way that they're looking at me.
There's so much that I don't have to be held accountable for, and I like that better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't?
Who doesn't want to not do shit? You know?
Who doesn't want to be called out on behavior that's questionable?
Right. There's also just you know, I have to do the dishes now. I didn't have to do the dishes before. Dishes are terrible.
That's one of the frustrating parts of like the flip side of the coin of this. Why can't we go back to those old ways? But also there's this huge resistance in these toxic masculinity circles about gold diggers. And like how dare women only want to date us for what we can provide. And like the audacity, like you don't want a woman just to date you because you're a meal ticket.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you would like to only bring these three things to the table, why is the expectation on us to like now also have a career and be a breadwinner and not be taking advantage of you? It's very backwards. It's like fucking pick one.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I'm sorry.
gotta-
I'm just laughing
No,
because
please.
of that.
I want you to read it out loud.
Walker's playbook. Step 1, chop some wood. Step 2, put a bun in the oven. It's a wood burning stove. Thank you. That was brilliant.
I also noticed the partner used to want to watch me shave. I've heard that a lot before from women, that they find it very sexy when a man does the... And yeah.
That was a big deal. When I started woodworking, Allison was out there watching me all the time.
Dude.
Yeah.
Because...
Working with wood, everybody.
And you know where the shaving thing comes from? Watching our dads get ready for work in the morning. Dad, you know, like beards are much more popular now than they used to be. But when I was growing up, my dad was an attorney at the time, and he would shave every day before work. And I kind of remember just like sitting and watching, and there was a very comforting thing about that.
Yeah.
Familiarity is comfortable.
If you have a healthy relationship with your father,
If you have
it
a
makes
healthy
sense that
relationship
you
with your
would
father.
take some of those masculine cues. And this just goes to show that like where the issue here is not all masculinity. That was very close to me saying not all men, but like yeah, there's a lot about masculinity that we want to hang on to, and if it's worth anything, it's gonna stand up to scrutiny, and you know it's gonna keep going, and nobody's gonna have a problem with it.
Well, so what's interesting, because we can get in trouble in all different ways of defining things these days. We do want to say, I think men and women can have all of the traits that we're talking about, but we're also not saying that men and women are the same. There's a lot to be said, and that's on the very far left side of the coin. They're like, it's just society that teaches you all of these different things.
It's all a construct.
It's all a construct.
Imaginary. It's all made up.
And it's not, because having blonde or brunette hair changes your space in the world. How you think about yourself, how you move throughout the space, how you exist in the tribe. Now imagine your entire bone structure is different. Your muscle structure and your ability to use flexibility, all those things are different. Your hormones are drastically different. Your brain chemistry is different, and the structure of your brain is different. You would think there are a series of different traits that do come from that.
Sure.
So that is sort of like, those differences have created the birthplace of where masculine and feminine traits sort of like spawned from. There are things that, like what we're talking about, being strong and chopping wood, it's easier for men to build muscle mass.
200 years ago, gender roles made a lot more sense because they were needed.
Right. I lift a lot of things in my house because I am literally twice the size of my wife.
And I think that hostility towards the notion that there are gender differences is just kind of rooted. Well, it feels like an overreaction or maybe an overcorrection to that binary not being respected equally on the same side.
Yeah.
Because I remember we watched this horror movie, The Witch, which takes place in 1620.
Yes.
It's about a family trying to survive alone. I left that movie being like, wow, gender roles make a lot of sense in 1620 because you were the only one who can keep that baby alive with, your breastfeeding. And between the two of us, I should probably go kill the thing in the woods and bring home dinner. And if we don't do that, we're going to be dead in like
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
We can't just trade off.
Yeah.
No.
And so I understand where they're rooted. I just think we have moved along as a society and as a species technologically and, infrastructurally that the gender divide doesn't make as much sense. And
well, it's just not as needed anymore.
It's not as needed because if your survival depends on, machine agriculture and a grid staying up, it's like, cool, whoever's got those skills can get that job done, and it doesn't really matter, what's in their pants.
Well, there are also so many different tiers of masculinity now. Taking the same sort of like, I'm strong thing. Well, you could be strong because you're financially very intelligent. You could be strong because you're a weightlifter and you have a lot of muscle mass. You could be strong because you've trained in the military and you have great survival skills.
Or you could be strong because you've been through some tough shit and you have a lot of emotional intelligence and resilience.
Right. So what has happened now is there used to be a single tier of like, I'm strong and masculine because I've taken care of my house and people are alive and I can physically do things. Now it's like, I'm a beach bro who's super jacked next to a CEO that runs this big company, next to a philanthropist who like changed the planet. And each of them are at the top of their tiers, but their tiers are completely unrelated.
Wildly different.
And don't translate to each other. And so the definition of masculinity, each figure I've described as masculine, not at all in the same way. And they're trying to go toward, and they're up different ladders. you know?
That's what I really don't like about the toxic masculinity space is it seems disrespectful of men, and it seems incredibly limiting of men.
Yeah.
Kind of saying that, like, well, you can only be a man in these very specific ways because we don't trust you to be able to develop alternate skills. We don't trust you to believe in yourself and have strength in these different areas. So, like, why would you even try? It's kind of like what we've talked about before with that whole mentality of, like, you know, in a non-consensual situation, very often the excuse will be, well, he's a man, he couldn't help himself. Like, do you think he's an animal? Like, how disrespectful.
We talked about that in the Extreme Monogamy podcast.
Extreme!
Of just like, if there's a woman around, I gotta have sex.
Yeah.
I can't control my emotions.
Right.
And then it's like, well, that's actually not a masculine trait.
No, that seems very sweet.
Very delicate.
Yeah.
And weak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That easily influenced by the appearance of a shoulder or a calf muscle.
Thanks, Missouri. Super Dark Void is killing it. So we have gender Luddites now. Love that.
Yeah.
The gender Luddite.
Well, one of the things I know this has been really important for you, and this is not on our docket, but I think it's worth transitioning the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Masculinity is changing a lot, and we want to talk about how we create a society that creates more space for this, encourages masculinity to evolve in a lot of ways that serve the community as opposed to taking from the community. Do you have ideas on how we start with that? Where do we start?
No, so I think it comes back to kind of what I was saying about respecting the both sides of the coin more. So if erasing gender roles is an overreaction to seeing femininity as weakness, what happens if we elevate femininity, if we get in touch with our own feminine sides, if we're brave enough to, bake or sew or any, embracing the kinds of feminine traits that men and boys are conditioned to distance themselves
Which
from.
is crazy because back in the day, and also still today, men dominate the baking space.
Dominate professional kitchens.
Dominate professional kitchens, baking. Men dominate the tailoring space and a lot of the fashion space. So men are still the best at the feminine parts of things.
Well, I think that's part of it. Also, like creativity, like music and art. It doesn't count unless you're the best. Does that make sense? Like if your son is trying to if he likes painting and he wants to paint instead of playing a sport, there might be some pushback unless he's this incredibly successful painter whose paintings are going for millions of dollars. So
ballet.
Right. So as long as you are dominating the space, it's okay. But nobody gets to the top of their world instantaneously. It takes years of messing up and being not so good at it.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day when we were talking about in the time period of the witch, there were different jobs that made sense that were divided by genders.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there was another period that happened where it's like, well, we need all these jobs, but men should only be doing the jobs so that they're done well. Now we're in a space where everybody can do all of the jobs, right? As far as
I mean,
there are female coal miners.
Yeah, female firefighters.
Right.
That's a hell of a physical
It's a hell of a
test you have to
physical
pass.
and
for
there
that.
are jobs that tend to attract more men and more women, and that's fine. To circle back to your question, I think part of it is I struggle to think of qualities that define a good man that don't apply to women too.
Right.
And so, I mean, aside from very, very specific and very, very gendered roles like giving birth and breastfeeding, like not
ever going to be most of our strong suits.
Men can breastfeed.
But just as long as we like elevate our respect for the non-traditional, like what are the ways we depart from normal masculinity, and how do we treat people who don't fall outside that expectation? So that goes for, you know, like the female attorneys with a shrewd, aggressive killer instinct, or the stay-at-home dads whose wives, you know, make more money, but they are much more effective at running a household and, you know, executing domestic tasks and labor.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that guy is still a man, even though he's not pulling in, you know, the 6-figure job, because that function is just as important to, you know, an operational household. And
Right. He's taking over the roles that need doing in a partnership.
yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a lot of men, and this is what is it? It starts with an H, homophily or whatever, people that like the same things. I just heard it earlier today and I'm not remembering
I
it.
don't know this word.
Anyway, we tend to align ourselves with people that have similar beliefs to us.
Mm-hmm.
Our tribes are built, like human beings are designed that way. There's a lot of energetic reasons behind that. So I don't spend a lot of time, nor really know any men in the space that we're talking about. I don't hang out with a lot of like sensitive, delicate, hyper toxic alpha men.
Mm-hmm.
Never run across them. It's not a thing in my space. And we've had this conversations back in a very long time ago when we were having these, we started a long time ago having consent conversations over Zoom during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And part of the thing that we were talking about there was like, how do we bring these people along? The men that are out there that are feeling left behind, the men that are out there that feel like they need to overcompensate or lean farther into an angrier space. How do we get those guys? Because like you and I could start a group where we hang together, like a dad group that we share shit and talk about our feelings and create that open space. And we're still not bringing these guys into it.
Just the fact that you're seeking out and forming a space like that says a lot about where you are in terms of how you feel about your masculinity,
right,
and how you react to it, versus someone that like may not even seek out that group at all, but cries at night.
I mean, I think you kind of have to meet people where they are.
Sure.
I think it helps. I know I have an easier time connecting with those folks because of how, like, if you just look at me and don't see me crying at Disney movies or, like, processing my feelings with my partner, you know, I look like a typical man's man. I tick a lot of those classic boxes. But I think if you go into those situations with a more open mind, like, you'll be surprised by people. Like, I've definitely been caught off guard by, like, how if you project a sense that, you know, a man's man is okay expressing vulnerability around you, like, they'll pick up on that subconsciously.
Sure.
And you can kind of just, like, instead of having to break down a wall, you kind of just, like, leave a door open. And it's like, oh, hey, it's cool to talk about these things with you because I know you're not gonna judge me the way that I'm afraid my male friends might. You know, it's so frustrating thinking about, like, early adulthood and how much we all performed for each other, thinking we were, like, you know, holding up this standard that nobody really wanted to do. We were just all afraid to be the first person to like bring vulnerability into that into that man space. I have seen a lot of progress with my guy friends from back in the day when we were just dumb bros with each other.
But I think, I think one of the things we can do is just make it clear that you're really not trying to like demonize or attack traditional roles, like hunting, sports, whatever that looks like for you, that you feel like is under threat from this changing norm. Find a way to connect to like the value in it. Like, I'm a big believer that there's no inherent value judgment on skills and information and wisdom. And granted, like I might have my own coastal elite ideas about people who are really into football, or people who are really into the military, or people who are really into hunting. But that doesn't mean I know everything. That doesn't mean I know who they are. I don't know what their relationship with those practices is.
Sure.
I don't know how, they feel connected to their dad by watching these games. They, their favorite uncle taught them a lot about survival in the wilderness when they were hunting. They have a family history of military service. And, that doesn't mean that they fall into every trope. So just kind of going into those more, aggressively male spaces with a little bit of softness, I think, can do wonders.
Yeah, I think the softness and the empathy is good. I also, we were talking about women being attracted to deciders. Men are also attracted to deciders. And it may not be a sexual thing. It is really just, I have always found myself, if I'm ever in a space where somebody brings up something kind of toxic, the faster that I jump on being like, that's not cool, man. And the rest of the group goes, oh God, he decided really quickly. The rest of the group all of a sudden starts doubting their own things, because if you are the most decisive person in the space, you are running the space, regardless of like where people want to steer it, or whatever ideas they want to like celebrate that may not be serving the community. If like, and this is what I'm saying about just like people, if you're worried about calling family members out at the holidays or on visits, if somebody says something fucked up, the faster you respond to that, you change the dynamic of the space. And it doesn't have to be an aggressive thing. You don't have to be like, you're an asshole for saying that.
Just stating it.
Just stating and being like, that's not really cool. I actually don't agree with that.
Because you've projected confidence in a certain...
You are projecting the most masculine energy in that space.
Which is that your opinion on this is not going to shake me from expressing mine.
And that's part of the sort of like male space. There's a lot of pack-oriented dynamics that happen. We gain value in relationship to other things. So like, if I set myself as being at the top of this mountain, just by being the most decisive person in the room, the rest of the group is more likely to jump on that bandwagon.
Or the people who are too nervous or afraid to speak up about something like that just don't feel alone anymore. And they're like, oh, if Peter feels that way, cool. Like, it's okay for me to express that opinion too. And then you've created a little chain reaction where maybe they're a little bit more bold next time.
I've had a lot of luck with diffusing. I want to call it like it's the sensitive masculinity space of like people that are like so aggressive because their things are being threatened. Allison's ex was a very like in your face about his feelings kind of person. So, for example, he was very tall. He's very tall.
It's okay.
Yeah. I'm not as tall. I'm pretty tall.
Yeah.
I'm 6'2", not 6'6", and I love being 6'2".
It's great.
And maybe I'll be 6'6". I don't know.
You hit your head on a lot of stuff.
That's true. I hit my head all the fucking time.
But anyway, we're at a New Year's party, and everyone was taking a group photo. And part of this sort of like sensitive masculinity space is like you pick fights all the time to kind of like reassert your dominance.
Get to the back.
Yeah. So I was just kind of like standing there while everyone was getting into place, and he comes over and he's like, "You should get in front because I'm taller than you."
Yes, sir.
But my response to that was not a, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. My response to that was like, are you okay? That's a super weird thing to say right now. Like, yeah, I'm happy to stand here. You're right. You are taller than me. And that's amazing.
Good job.
Did something happen to you?
Yeah, and we had interactions like this all the time. Like, there was a time I was running late to a thing that everyone was getting together at, and I showed up and like went around and hugged people and said hi when I finally got there. Got over to him and he goes, "You're late." And I said, "Okay,
You're right.
for sure."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm late.
Astutely
That is-
observed.
that is the thing that happened. You
That's
know,
also a great way just to dissipate like bullying, and not bullying when people are beating the shit out of you, but just if people are trying to make fun of you, you're like, yeah, you're right. This outfit isn't that great.
yeah.
Fancy that.
I didn't know I was on the runway
I am
today.
very
Yeah.
bald.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. But I also have a weird thing in sort of like my own masculine defensive spaces of like, I could be mean to myself, but you can't be mean to me. So if like somebody came up to me like, "Peter, you're fat," I'd be like, "Okay, I can call myself fat." That's my own self-criticism shit that I'm working through, bro. Right? But you, I'm not gonna threaten you. I also just don't care. And that's like also like a lot of the masculine space of being like, oh, I can either attack you or I could just be like, well, if I really want to be an alpha male about this, I could go, oh, well, your opinion doesn't matter.
Right. And what dominates the space more, and
Yeah.
what makes the other person feel more ridiculous for even saying some dumb
Right.
shit like
Yeah.
that? Like, what was that interaction on Mad Men? With Don Draper and the shorter guy in the elevator when he's like, I think about you and I just feel sorry for you, and he turns and goes, I don't think about you at all.
Oh,
Like,
so
oh,
good.
just
So good.
you're not even on my fucking radar, man. Have a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Walker,
Yeah.
what do healthier models look like? Real life role models. Who's cool in the masculinity space?
That's a good question. And can we just like put a big old disclaimer on this section of the video, because
If anyone that we mention in the future turns out to be a sexual
rapist
predator,
or
they get automatically taken off the list, and we're sorry.
Yeah.
You just because you never know.
You never know.
I mean, I love
We
Hugh
don't-
Jackman.
you
You
don't-
know, like
Yeah.
Hugh Jackman can
Huge
tap
Jackman.
dance and sing and put on Broadway musicals and play a
And
gay man
Deadlift
and then
400 pounds.
and then also just
So
shred
strong.
yeah.
all of the bad guys in X-Men. You know, he's
Absolutely.
running the full gamut. Of,
Seems caring, empathetic towards
Yeah.
his friends and family.
yeah, very much so.
Lifts other people up.
Yeah.
What an asshole.
Um,
I mean, he is an asshole because by existing, he makes the rest of us, and I mean everyone on the planet, look worse by comparison.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd agree with that.
he's a good one. Who else?
You've mentioned The Rock.
I guess he comes to mind. Yeah, he seems like a guy who's very secure in his masculinity and isn't easily threatened. Arnold Schwarzenegger, I kind of got to give him some cred.
He's got a pet donkey.
He's also just like, you know,
Very cool.
I think as somebody who's lived and existed in such a hyper masculine mode for so long, I love seeing him, you know, speak up for things that matter and clearly, you know, have no bearing on his ego at all.
So, big question for you though, and this is to help the communities out there. How do we help people become Hugh Jackman?
Well,
Do you know what I mean? Because the thing that's being
lower your
marketed-
expectations.
Well,
first.
no, I know that. But what's being sold in these spaces, like, if you do this, if you're this way towards women, if you blah blah blah, you'll be the most masculine version, and that's like Andrew Tate is saying that.
Well,
How do we encourage the community that is out there trying to find their way to, like, obviously not all of us can be Hugh Jackman, but like head in that direction?
well,
How do we go in?
when you mention those three guys, the first thing that comes up in my head is all three of those men went on a path of bettering themselves for themselves. And then they happened to learn a lot of these lessons, whether it was through weightlifting or through like navigating the wrestling into the Hollywood world, or whether it was through like, you know, Hugh Jackman used to be a gym teacher. So like starting as a teacher and then like cultivating his skills and navigating the world of the performing arts. Like it really seems like they each had goals and actively worked towards them, not to impress other people, but because they wanted to respect who they were when they looked in the mirror. And then a lot of things came flooding in behind that.
I fucking love that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, listen up. You want to get to live in that masculine space like Hugh Jackman? Find something and work at it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you care about?
Not for the intention of impressing the community, not for the intention of impressing mates, but just the fact that like you want to improve as a human being. That will lead you towards the path of positive masculinity.
Live authentically to to yourself and what matters to you, and not because you think it serves somebody else's needs.
You're building up your credit with yourself. You're making deposits into your own integrity bank, into your own emotional wellness bank, into your own physical wellness bank. Because even though you're not doing it for other people will notice.
You guys mentioned the pickup artist community. Somebody I kind of have to give a shout out to is, do you know Mark Manson? He's a writer. He wrote a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. But
there's a documentary that just came out.
Oh, cool. He's somebody I think is very interesting because he came up in like the finance bro world and then just kind of like left it to go do his own thing. He was also in the pickup artist community for a while, and he kind of saw the bullshit that was intrinsic to it. And he wrote this interesting book called Models, speaking of healthier models. But it's a dating advice book, and it's called Models, How to Attract Women Through Honesty and Vulnerability. And basically what he did was he distilled all of the kind of peacocky, fake alpha bullshit that's prevalent in the pickup artist community and sort of boiled it down to like what was at the core of those things. And the gist of the book is basically just live authentically to yourself, invest in things that you care about, get better at them, and instead of trying to figure out like what to say to a woman to get her to sleep with you, or like how to pick somebody up, it's invest in becoming somebody that people want to date or be around or be friends with. If you meet someone who's living their passion, even if they have
if it's puppetry,
even if they have hobbies,
accounting, it doesn't matter.
Hobbies that are non-traditional or seem weird or kind of goofy or silly. Like somebody who's living authentically to themselves is so much more attractive and interesting than somebody who you get the sense is only performing for the sake of others.
I think that has been something that has changed in the world, and people really love that. So like, for example, back in the day, if you had a certain hobby, if that hobby was not in the mainstream, you were a dork and a loser. Now, any hobby that you have,
whatever it is,
you can be the coolest person. I mean, like, look what was happened to video gaming. We're on Twitch right now. People out there are legends. If you're a fucking stamp collector and you walk into a space and you're like, I am the most legendary stamp collector ever.
I bet there's stamp talk.
Yeah. The library of stamps that I have in my collection would make you weep.
Yeah. And that is one of the beautiful sides of the internet is that no matter
Yeah.
what you're into, you can find a community of people that are into the same thing, and that can be damaging or it can be incredibly validating and uplifting.
Yeah, that is definitely the upside of the internet. It's like,
Yeah.
bro, I am so into quilting. It's like, dude,
I love
quilt your face off. Yeah.
There's a Victorian folk dancing community in Los Angeles.
No
Really?
way.
Oh my God, it's huge. They have events every night. I've met
love
some
that.
people in that space. And like, if you are just like, hey, I've seen it in the movies where they're walking and they match their
I was going to say, is it the hands?
Yes.
The
Well,
delicate
guess
palms?
what? Go be the best Victorian folk dancing person.
Go live your Pride and Prejudice dreams.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah. And then if you're on a date and you're like, I'm kind of a big deal in the Victorian dancing community, and they're like, oh, that's weird, you go, great, this date's not working.
Yeah.
Right.
Clearly we're not right for each other.
Yeah.
I'm going to find somebody that is another fan.
I would love so much to be taken on a date to something that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And not only that, but then to see that the person who brought me there has like standing
It's
and
like
skills in the
OG.
community.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, you're a big deal here. Like,
Could you imagine being on a date with this stamp collector person? Everyone's like, oh my God, that's so-and-so.
well, like
Do you know
when,
what stamps he has?
when we met online, and even though we ended up not doing this for our first date, we were talking about blacksmithing, and just the fact that he was like he knew a forge he could take me to, and had been there enough times and knew enough about it that he could show me some really basic blacksmithing shit. Already, I was just like, excuse me?
Have you gone?
Yeah.
Yeah,
She blacksmithed the knife.
yeah.
I need to find out where this place is. I want to go.
Glendale. It's called Adam's Forge.
Okay. I'm going to write it down.
It's super fun. It
I haven't been
is
in
a
many
workout
years,
for
yeah.
your forearms. Holy shit.
Yes, I
But,
forgot that me being enormous was going to make it a lot easier for me.
Yeah, he's like pounding away at these knives, and I'm like, ugh. My
Yeah.
entire arm was jelly an hour in easily, but it was so fun.
Yeah. That's great. And that's another traditional gender role.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the blacksmith in A Knight's Tale, and you're like, wait a second.
Oh my
A
god.
woman made his plate armor?
Yeah.
Yes.
She was so hot though.
She sent me an Instagram video of this woman who gets a Viking sword to chop wood with it, and she's just got like guns.
She's got like short blonde hair, the most incredible arms you've ever seen, and
Homegirl's
Damn.
just chopping wood. She can chop me all day long.
whew,
Excellence is sexy no matter where on the spectrum it is.
Yeah.
Excellent effort.
authenticity.
Yeah,
I love it.
that's that real shit.
And women can do this too.
That it's sexy for everybody. Honestly, you know what you were saying before about like, you know, oh, I'm a nice guy, so I shouldn't have to question what else I can bring to the table. I think sometimes there can also be an attitude of, well, I'm a woman, so what
I have a
else
vagina,
do
yeah.
right? Like, what else do I need to bring to the table?
Ugh.
And I have this rule in my personal relationships that I'm not always perfect about, but generally I try to be good. I don't ask anything from my partner that I am not willing to provide in return. So like if I'm asking for gentleness or understanding, or if I need my partner to step up in certain areas, if I require that my partner be open to conversations where they can be held accountable, I am absolutely saying, please hold me to these standards as well.
Yeah.
Because like these roles are not defined anymore, and we all have to be bringing everything we can. I just think that in the pursuit of economic fairness, that all of these like female traits, you know, the emotional intelligence traits women had kind of already cultivated, and now we are also bringing some of the more classically masculine traits to the table. And we're kind of waiting for men to bring the traits that they typically have not practiced or have not been encouraged or have been actively discouraged. We're like, well, I've stepped up in these areas, so you can step up too.
Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot of evolving that needs to happen. I was just going to ask you guys, where do you think things are going? you know, something that's stood out to me is I love very strong, very intelligent, very confident, very capable women.
Mm-hmm.
That's sexy as fuck to me.
Yeah.
That is in the minority, sort of still.
Yeah.
There,
I read this thing like a week ago. It was some kind of like, am I the asshole? Where this woman was on like a third date with this guy, and she said, I think I'm going to order the steak. And he was like, oh, why don't you order the chicken? She's like, what? No, I don't like the seasoning they use on the chicken. He's like, they also have a salmon. Maybe you should get that. She's like, no, I don't really like salmon. And it came out that he was like, well, just ordering a steak isn't very ladylike or attractive.
Can you imagine?
Like, are you fucking kidding me? On our first date, we went to all-you-can-eat Korean barbecue, and I stuffed my face.
Because, you know, if they stuff their face with meat, well...
but
can you imagine being that insecure that a woman ordering a steak is gonna...
But like
gonna
what we were
turn you
saying
off.
about short men that are struggling in the dating space, women that are badasses
Who eat a lot of meat.
who eat a lot of meat also struggle in the dating space.
Yeah.
Or who have high achievement in their professional
who have high
lives.
achievement in profession. They also struggle.
Yeah.
Do we see that shift happening? I don't want to say because I'm already biased because I'm not interested if they're not challenging me. So I'm coming from the opposite end of the spectrum.
Sure.
Well, so one of the things, I mean, this is kind of like circling back to what you asked me about how to get in the not like-minded men on board with this. I think the way we interact with each other online is very reductive and very glib and very unconstructive a lot of the times. And I think, you know, a lot of these stories that come up about insecure dudes, they're easy to write off. And, like, I get it. I fucking get the frustration of going on a date with somebody like that. But if you want to know how to change things, I gotta come back to, like, meeting them where you're at and getting better at having the conversation of like, so why does that make you feel weird? Like, why is it weird that she orders the steak? Like, what does that say to her? And really kind of like picking those things apart. That's not your responsibility as the woman on that date.
That's all.
To do that work.
That's all I was going to say.
At all.
I want to see more of men offering that kind of support to each other.
Yeah.
Because classically, you know, like, oh, let me date him, and when I'm through with him, he'll be like a functional human being.
Yeah. So my hope is that guy told that story to his boys, and at least one of them was like, hey, are you okay? Because why is that a deal breaker? Why does that matter? And I mean, I do think that we're moving in the right direction, and I think that the men who have felt okay with, or who don't feel like their masculinity is under attack, have seen the benefits of more equity manifested in their own lives enough that, you know, even though it might still be hard sometimes, like, they're like, I don't want to go back. Like, it sucked having to hide who I was and to not talk about these things.
And also, it sounds like a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's
to
a
just
lot of pressure.
be the provider of so many things besides emotional support.
Well, we've talked about this even last episode about in those situations, you either, when you're looking at your fellow men that are doing very well in these spaces, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of like challenging emotional growth that is not easy to do, or be angry and hate women.
Being angry sounds easier.
It sounds easier.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like what's happening is like, I got to do the emotional work, or I blame other people for my problems. You know, and encourage. This is sort of like a big thing with human nature. We don't love broccoli.
Speak for yourself.
I don't.
You're, like, but the thing is, like, it's good for us. But when you're like, oh, you want to have this like cheeseburger, or do you want to have just like this bunch of vegetables? You're like, well, unless I'm like having a cleanse, I'm gonna choose the cheeseburger, you know, because
you want
it's
the thing
going
that tastes better in the moment, that has more payoff in the moment than down the line.
right. And so then that's another thing that these guys talk about, the like pickup artists and the Andrew Tates of the world. And it's actually a true and helpful thing, because there's always this kind of stuff. There's always a kernel of truth in their advice. They talk about the fact that like there is a lack of discipline
Yeah.
that is going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is true, but like, where is that discipline taking you is another thing.
Yeah, that's
You
why
know?
I hear a lot of the things that, you know, folks who love like Jordan Peterson, and I get why his, you know, rhetoric can be really appealing, because a lot of the things he talks about are pretty spot on. That like if you are taking more responsibility for yourself and like putting your own house in order, that feels good, and
Yeah.
it feels like you have ownership of yourself and your life. They just kind of like add some addendums that I'm just like, well, you know.
Well, that's how they get you.
Yeah, that's
They
how
get you with the reasonable stuff first.
Yeah.
Well, dude, Scientology. I went to the Scientology Center to see what their
The big blue building on Sunset?
to
Oh,
see what their
That place is so creepy.
It's, yeah.
It is, and what's amazing is like their workshop, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
I believe
it's
it.
not nonsense.
I believe it.
And the funny thing is their workshop is all about like these psychological tools that are very helpful. They have really great insights. One of the things they do is they say, don't read psychology books, because if you read psychology books, you would know that that's what they're talking. That's what they're talking about. And that is true about cults. Cults start with tools that are very useful and very practical tools, and then they set, you know, you're already in. They take you. The whole Nexium cult was this incredible leadership movement that had horrible and horrific things happen. There are tools there.
Well, and I feel it also comes from a place of empathy, of like, hey, you're having this struggle and this is a real struggle.
Yeah.
And you're not a bad person for
Yeah.
experiencing this. You just don't know how to deal with it. And I
Right.
think that shift of perspective when it comes to like not getting your own house in order, like not being disciplined, right? Like I've spent a lot of time working out with my therapist, like, why can't I just do this? Why can't I just follow through? Why can't I just like be this person that I'm imagining I should be in my head? And one day she said to me, you do realize that like all these things you're talking about with this delayed gratification, right? Why can't you be the person that invests the work now to get the payoff later? That's literally not how our brains are built.
Right.
Our brains evolved to do the thing that is going to make us feel good and satiated right here in this moment. So you're not a bad or weak person because you're struggling with this. It's literally, your brain is attuned. This is a survival tactic.
Yeah.
And
We need energy in order to do those things.
right, absolutely. And so just the reframing of like, you're not a disappointment, you're not a bad person, you're not failing yourself. Your brain is doing what it evolved to do, and just approaching it from that place of neutrality rather than I'm a piece of shit who needs to get my life together, of oh, my brain is just doing what it's supposed to do. Thanks.
Yeah.
Why don't we try something different? Just that bit of gentleness, that bit of understanding, instead of like shitting on you for not having everything in your life perfect. I think that is also the key to a fundamental shift.
There's also, and this comes back to the sort of like gender differences in our culture, at least. I can only speak to the American culture. Men have an expectation of discipline and success and hard work and like being at the top of your game. Because, again, we've talked about this, if you don't do those things, you do not have value. Women don't have the same expectation of like hardcore discipline apart from looks and obtaining a partner.
Mm-hmm.
That's where all the pressure sort of lands on like,
Well, and then keeping the household running once
Right.
you have that partner. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether people say thank you or not.
Yeah.
It is your job to every single day keep these children raised and fed in this house running.
But there's a thing of like, if you don't have a high paying job, if you're not succeeding at the top tier or whatever thing that you set out to be, I've seen in the sort of like female space that there's just a lot of grace. There's a being like, okay, well, she's wherever she's at. She's having
Your husband makes more than you?
Yeah,
That's great.
That's fine. It's good. You're having an emotional meltdown for 5 months, whatever. Eventually you won't, and then you can go back to nobody cares.
Right.
If you have a partner and you're attractive.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But
if you've hit those goalposts, you're fine.
But in our space, in this sort of like the male space, the expectation is we are failing unless we are super succeeding. And there isn't the same grace for not succeeding.
For not succeeding, yes. But what you were saying about as long as this puzzle piece is here, then we're probably not going to hold you accountable for a lot of other things, right? As long as women are like attractive, usually thin, and have a partner, if men have a hot partner and a successful job,
Then you're good.
Then they're let off
Right,
the hook
right.
for a lot of other things as well.
Yeah.
They're given grace. It's just not framed that way.
And that's sort of like, I think what is radicalizing a lot of the community online is, we talked about this before, about like the earning potential of what you need to hit in order to be quote unquote successful is 25 times more than what it used to in the previous generation. And so then you go, okay, I can't really afford that right now. I've got roommates, or I'm still living at home helping my family out. And in all the various spaces of your community, you would be considered a failure
To launch.
to a lot of different people, and you're just what a disappointment. You're not hitting all these markers, and then they go online and they're like, well, this community is telling me that like I'm failing because the game is rigged and it's other people's fault. And then you go, we talked about this last time, of like, I feel good about staying where I'm in. I'm angry and I feel righteous and justified not moving, which takes away all the pressure I had of like having to like push myself harder.
And achieve.
And then your brain will go, great, stay right here.
Yeah, this feels
stay right
good.
here. The anger feels fine.
Yeah.
It's not your fault. You don't have to do anything else.
And the game is rigged against you.
the game is rigged.
Just not because of women.
Yeah.
The game is
Yeah.
very much rigged against them.
We didn't make the rules, man.
It's hard, and you know, this is something I want to put out there, which I think is just when we talk about not holding space for men and how it's so easy to insult them. Look at how easy it is to make jokes about men's penis sizes. It's general in the community. One, not something anybody has any control over. Guess what? The penis you have, it's the penis you were born with. However, it is not just readily available, but socially accepted and encouraged to be like, look at that guy, it's because he's got a small dick. Or like, blah, blah, I was dealing with this, he's got a small penis. He's an insufficient human being. And we will take those kinds of digs. And that's a space that has yet to be protected or stopped.
I still do that.
Like,
well, because so when I
small
hear
dick energy.
somebody like flooring their car through a residential area, or I'm just like, wow, that guy's got a really impressive package. The implication being that
He does not.
He does not.
right.
But the one of my favorite things in trying to translate to the men of another mind is just taking traditional metrics of masculinity and saying like, okay, if your idea of a man is to fuck as many women as you want, that having a giant dick means that you get laid less, right? Because any woman,
Not everybody can handle a giant dome.
yeah.
There's also a lot of issues that come with having a big penis.
Yeah.
Having it get hard enough, that's a thing. MOAM.
And also, the size of your dick has little to no impact on your ability to satisfy a sexual partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For some people, it's a piece of it, but I think I've had a pretty good sample size, and there is very little correlation there.
Totally, but the
honestly.
thing is though is like we still to this day have built up protections in our society about not making fun of people that are overweight, about not making fun of people
Absolutely.
of like, you know, for a wide variety of physical
Yeah.
reasons, except for that one. And when does that change, and how does that change? You know, because what we all are continuing to do is like create a space where you are an insufficient and unvaluable figure, and that's what I'm saying. And then people don't normally overcompensate in ways that are positive.
Absolutely. I will say about that specific insult. I am also very much a body positivity kind of person. You should not like poke fun at people and go for cheap shots of things that they have no control over.
Yeah.
However, the people that are revving these shitty fucking engines through my cul-de-sac neighborhood where there are kids, the people that are treating other people like shit, I'm like, oh man, that small dick energy, a big portion of that comes from, oh, this is the thing that doesn't mean anything to me, but is gonna piss them off. This is the last thing that they want to be called because of this behavior that they're exhibiting. So it's sort of like a tit for tat kind of situation.
Yeah.
Like the whole you know, Greta and Tate back and forth, where you could say, oh, well, you know, she kind of took a cheap shot or whatever. And I'm like,
Oh, he was taking a cheap shot.
he was taking
Yeah.
a cheap shot. And she didn't think about like, what's the highest road insult I could, what would be the most meaningful insult? She chose the insult that would be the most meaningful to him
Sure,
because
yeah.
of it. And I think that may be one of the reasons that this kind of, it's got a small dick energy has been so pervasive, because anyone who uses it against someone knows that that is going to be the thing that gets to them the most and the quickest.
Because they're operating on,
Right.
on a problematic and simplistic
because
metric.
that is what their value system is based off of. It doesn't matter if it's based off of mine or not.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I think it should be continued, but I think that's why it's having trouble dying out.
Well, I guess what I'm speaking to is more the level of casualness that particular like insult is used. In the situation that you're talking about, yeah, totally get it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course. And I'm not saying that like people can't insult other people and like can't be clever about those things. It's really just an interesting thing, and not even just like used as an insult. That is our way of like striking down men.
Like metaphorically neutering them.
Yeah. Like metaphorically
Or
neutering them.
emasculating, I guess is the right.
And it's something that is interesting because it's not a thing that, well, assholes do it. But like, it's not a thing that you do with anybody else. Of like taking whatever their Achilles heel and just sort of like banding it about and like poking at it. Like if I know someone that is so insecure about this one thing that I just kind of like riff on it and be like, oh, did you see so-and-so's blah, blah, blah thing the other day? And we just like casually just like fucking talk about it, riffing with our friends. That is something that sort of exists in the space. And on the inverse of that, that tool should exist in the space, because if men are bigger than you, well, then you have psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You got to have some tools in your tool belt.
Yeah, you got to reach for whatever you can in
Right.
the face of an opponent that has unimaginably more power than you do.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just something that I've thought has been interesting, because I've seen it even in the very like body positive community. And I was like, I don't think that's ever going away.
And I don't see it come up in conversations like this. I really only see it come up in like those kind of quick passing insult kind of situations. most people that I speak to in my circles, we're kind of all in agreement on the big penis, medium penis, small penis thing. It's like,
Right.
most of the time, it's either it. We don't rate dicks on a 1 to 10. It's a binary system. It's either a yes or a no. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
like, you know, and more importantly, like how badly do you want to please your partner? Like what's your mouth and hand game look like? You know, because that's really the much more reliable metric with you know, women's anatomy.
Effort.
Yeah, effort and
I am
just,
sexually attracted to effort.
just being invested in their pleasure is
And
the
that
most
comes
important
back to
thing.
what we were talking about is like take passion, put a lot of energy into everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people are interested in.
Yeah.
Wow. We've gone all over the place.
Hugh Jackman, Dix, The Witch.
Yeah.
It's been a roller coaster.
It's been a roller coaster. Anyway, thank you both. You're such wonderful humans.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Human.
And thanks for being here. We're going to have many more talks. We'll let you know what next week's conversation is going to be. I'm so grateful that this community has responded so well to this consensual conversations podcast. Like getting into some like real shit with each other.
And stuff that's like not easy to parse
Yeah.
around and talk about. It's
I like when we discover things and being like, oh yeah, actually we need to break that down. I haven't thought about that one yet. Or anyway.
that's what friends are for.
Yeah. Like how Midsummer is not a good movie.
Midsummer
What?
is a great movie.
Midsummer
You're out of
is
your
a
mind.
dumpster fire, boring experience.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Which we will have a debate about.
Off the air.
Well,
Slow.
I mean, you're clearly wrong about that, so I guess I gotta give Andrew Tate another look and try this whole chauvinism
Yeah,
thing.
I think that you should.
Maybe
I think-
women are the problem after all.
It's a snoozer.
Well, okay, yes, it's long.
It's
but
not that
a-
it's long. It's boring.
It's a slow build.
It's boring, uninspired.
We were doing so great.
Drunkle Ted strikes again.
We were having such
with
a
his
nice
boomer
night.
opinions.
That's not a boomer opinion. I bet boomers love Midsummer.
No,
I don't think they
I don't think
do.
they've seen it.
Yeah, boomers don't know Midsummer.
Ari Aster is not exactly their
They saved
demographic.
it.
I don't know.
He's so hot right now.
All right.
Thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Bye.